Hi, Jack.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So we got a couple people here ready to learn a little bit more about the Public Services HND. I've taken people through just an introduction to DGHE. I've shown them the module of Public Services, and now I'd like to hand it over to you for the next half hour or so. Just so you know, some people might be coming and going in the background. So we are recording this session so that we'll be able to share it with those who either couldn't make it or joined late. So on that note, I will hand it over to you, Jack. Please introduce us to what you'd like to say today.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. Hi to everybody, all of our attendees. I'm Jack. I'm the Program Manager for the HND in Public Services and the BSc top-up in Criminology and Criminal Justice. When I was invited to talk to you today about the course, what we deliver, give you a little taster, if you like, of what we deliver. I was thinking a sort of really topical subject matter to which to talk to you about, something that we deliver. And I remembered a conversation that I had with my own students almost 4 weeks ago to the day on the 8th of March, which of course was International Women's Day. And I didn't realize, I'm going to show my ignorance here, I'm going to admit, I didn't realize how important this celebration was to my student body, to our student body at DGHE, and how this is celebrated across our sort of diverse student body. And so I thought I'm going to deliver a little bit of a session on the subject of gender, and really understands the importance of gender within the discipline of criminology and criminal justice. And the reason for that largely is because of how overlooked the subject matter of gender has been, particularly women's concerns, how overlooked this has been in our discipline. If we consider the history of criminology and criminal justice studies, you know, we understand our current criminal justice system, for example, from the 17th, 18th century. In terms of morals, what is right and what is wrong, we can understand from philosophy many centuries before that. And it wasn't until the 1960s, 70s that actually a feminist critique of criminology emerged within our discipline. And as a result, then, we can understand that focusing on women within crime and criminology and criminal justice is actually a relatively new area of interest. There is, as you can see on screen here, I've written a gender blindness that has plagued the discipline, to put it bluntly, since its inception. And really it was Carol Smart who really put feminism within criminology and drove feminism within the discipline in the sort of 1970s. And you can see from a really interesting quote, or at least I think it's really interesting here, that our knowledge is still in its infancy in comparison with the massive documentation on all aspects of male delinquency and criminality. The amount of work carried out on the area of women and crime is extremely limited. And that was in the 1970s. So since then, we've started to consider the sort of feminist perspective within criminology a little bit more. I want to share with you something else in relation to this. What we're going to be looking at in this sort of really sort of brief taster session is some of the major arguments as to why perhaps there is a gender gap within criminal justice system. Looking at sort of theoretical perspectives to understand this gap in relation to gender and crime, and evaluate the components of some of those explanations, some of those theoretical perspectives. And it's really key to evaluate and critique, to challenge the status quo. So that's what we're going to be doing. And I want to start really by considering whether or not gender matters. And this really is brought into sort of practical sense by Wootton, by her saying, if men behaved like women, the courts would be idle and the prisons empty. It's a really sort of profound quote. And I'd be interested if, sort of by a show of hands of our attendees, how you interpret this quote. What do you think Wootton means by this quote? If men behaved like women, the courts would be idle and the prisons empty. Are there any thoughts on that? Richard, is there anything that you have to say on this quote? Men behave like women, the courts would be idle, the prisons empty.
Richard, I could say my own opinion on this, but I've allowed you to talk if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Great, thanks, Anne. No, okay, it's that's fine. It's just sort of looking to see where our brains immediately take us to on the subject of gender, without sort of academic teaching, of course, on the subject. What I would invite you to do is to keep this quote in mind, particularly as we start to break it down into criminal justice matters. So if you can see from the chart here, this is a chart that represents the prison population, and we can see that overwhelmingly males dominate in the prison statistics. 95% of our prison population is made up of men, meaning that only around about 5% of our prison population is made up of women. So in answering the question as to whether gender matters, it absolutely matters to understand the huge, grave disparity that exists within and throughout the criminal justice system. And this is an area for investigation that, as academics, as students of both public service who work and operate in the prison system, but all the way throughout the criminal justice system, needs to be concerned with, to understand the different divisions, the different diversities that exist within our society. If we break that down a little bit further, we can actually see that there are huge disparities right across crime and criminal justice. And this table really represents these disparities in relation to particular offences. So the differences in offending patterns, offending behaviours. So taking a look at just a couple of these, what we can see with regards to sexual offences is that males dominate this crime from 75 to 1. So there is, for every 75 sexual offenders that are male, there is only 1 female. If we look at other offences such as violence against the person, we can see that there's 5.7 male offenders of this crime to just 1 female offender. And indictable is a really important word in relation to this, because indictable suggests that it's the most serious violence against the person. If it's indictable, you know, we're not just talking about a common assault, which you can see above, which is summary. We're actually talking sort of ABH, perhaps GBH offences. And actually, the only offence groupings where women dominate the statistics is television licence evasion and prostitution. These are the only offence groupings where women form a majority in these offences. And I'd also invite you to take a look and compare the different types of offences from where males dominate, which is these sort of first 3 brackets, the top 3 brackets here, in comparison to the bottom bracket where women form a majority. These at the bottom here are less serious offences, right? So we need to keep this in mind when we're comparing these offence groupings and which gender dominates these offence groupings. this is not just a matter for prison populations and the differences in offending behaviour. We can see it throughout the criminal justice process. Okay, men and women make up around about half the population each, right? But there are vast inequalities that persist throughout the criminal justice process when we consider the arrest rates, where males dominate, prosecution rates, again, males dominate, convictions, remanded, which means that the defendant is denied bail and therefore held in custody pending their trial. They've not even been found guilty yet. They're held in prison, and men are more likely to be remanded in custody pending trial. Women more likely to be granted bail. And we've just spoken about the prison population. So this has to be an area for concern among academics, among public service students, criminology students, and students who are interested in the social world. So those are the statistics, those are the sort of the facts. And now I would like you to sort of reflect on perhaps some possible explanations as to why that might be. Why you think men commit more crime than women, or to ask the same question a little bit differently, perhaps why women commit less crime than men. Anybody have any thoughts on this notion?
We have a quiet group with us today, Jack.
We do, and that's absolutely fine. This is all about sort of reflection and thinking. These are really complex questions, and I'll speak a little bit later on the importance of looking beyond simplistic answers to these extremely complex questions, because that's exactly what they are. That we sort of assume that we understand the social world really, really well, and it comes easy, natural, until we actually start asking these really problematic questions. And they do take sort of time to study, to read up, and to really think about, okay, yeah, why is it that men, how can we explain those huge, vast disparities that I've just presented to you? Well, of course, within a sort of practical, along with theoretical course, there are a number of explanations as to why this might be the case. And I'm going to start with sex role theory. Now, sex role theory assumes that, quite simply, boys and girls are socialized differently. Yeah, boys and girls are brought up with different influences in the household, parents, schooling, and even wider society. We have different experiences as we're growing up, when we're learning about normal behavior, when we're having those values instilled into us. Boys and girls have different experiences of that. And as a result of those differences, boys are more likely to become delinquent. That's what sex role theory states, generally speaking. There are a multitude of versions of sex role theory. I just want to focus on two today, particularly because of the time constraints that we have. And I will focus on Edwin Sutherland's version and Talcott Parsons. Now, they both subscribe to this sex role theory, but slightly differently. So starting with Sutherland then, he said that there are two main gender differences within this socialization process, the way in which we're brought up. First of all, girls are more closely supervised. They're more strictly controlled. And you might be able to sort of empathize this with this a little bit if you have siblings of the opposite sex and you think back to your childhood, or if you are a parent and have children of the opposite sex as well, you might socialize in this way. And you might reflect upon or remember when you were a child, if you were a girl, then perhaps you had more sort of tight restrictions in terms of where you were allowed to go out and play, the time in which you were required to come back as stipulated by your parents, in comparison to perhaps your brother, who was able to go off the estate who had an infinite time to go out and play and not have these such tight restrictions in terms of when they needed to be home. They had more freedom, right? That's what Edwin Sutherland says in terms of the socialization process. But also he says that boys are more likely to be encouraged to take risks and to be tough and aggressive. We sort of see this in everyday life, really, particularly in sport. Boys are encouraged to participate in sports such as football, rugby, wrestling, boxing. But what all of these sports have in common is that they're contact sports. They require aggression. They require toughness. And those values, those sort of personality traits, if you like, they're not confined to the sport. They spill out into the social world, right? Into their experiences when they go out to play, when they're with their friends. And so we see those values expressed in wider society as well. And as a result of that, boys, quite simply put, they have more opportunity, but most importantly, they have more inclination to commit crime because they have their values and they're taught those values of aggression and of toughness, and they're taught that this is correct, that this is right. So as a result, they're more likely to commit crime. So that's Edwin Sutherland's version of the sex role theory. Talcott Parsons' version of the sex role theory is that he refers to different roles within the nuclear family. Now, the nuclear family, first of all, assumes that there is a mother, there is a father, and there's about 2 children. And there are clearly defined gender roles within that family. There is the instrumental role, which is performed by the father. He's the leader, he's the provider, he goes out to work, puts food on the table. The expressive role is performed by the mother. And part of her role is to provide emotional support to the family and to socialize the children, to bring the children up, right? Now, what does this have to do with crime? Well, Parsons says that girls have a readily available female role model at home, their mother. Yeah, they're there, they're performing the expressive role, they're in the household. So they have a readily available female role model. But boys, because their father is performing the instrumental role, because he is out providing, out to work, etc., they have less access to a male role model. And so what happens when boys get to sort of early adolescence, according to Parsons, sort of 11, 12, 13 years old, they tend to reject the femininity that they've been brought up with from their mother and to compulsively pursue masculinity. And again, here we have an emphasis on toughness, we have an emphasis on aggression. And again, which we already know from Sutherland, can encourage antisocial behavior and delinquency. And that is why the family structure, the different roles that are assigned to each gender within that family, can encourage and lead to criminal tendencies in adolescence and adult offending. So it's the family structure. Now, consider when Parsons was writing, right? 1955, quite dated. And so we must absolutely evaluate this, and on this basis. Okay. Now, because women give birth to, or mothers give birth to, and nurse breastfeed children, Parsons sees women as biologically adapted to a nurturing and caring role. It's within their biology that they are just naturally nurturing. They're naturally able to socialize and bring up a family, bring up children. However, this is not a biological role. Socializing, bringing children up is not a biological role, any more in female biology than it is in male biology. And we can sort of evidence that by looking and comparing these family structures to same-sex family structures, for example, right? So that's why I sort of pointed out in the previous slide to really look at the year of which Parsons was writing, because it's outdated. If we consider the family structure, a common family structure today, it's probably different from what it was in the 1950s, where the nuclear family probably dominated with a mother, father, and a couple of kids, is not necessarily the case now. Yeah, we have a whole diverse range of families, same-sex families, step families, extended families, etc. So it's not that translatable in the 21st century. We need to be aware of that. So there are flaws within that theory. This is a sort of a meme that I came across on social media, which I thought was really perfect for another explanation as to the gender differences in offending between men and women. Only a true gentleman knows what is wrong with this picture. Any of my audience today hazard a guess, or maybe you know what is wrong with this picture? No? Okay. I must say, sorry, there was a...
Can I guess, Jack?
Yes, of course, please do.
Since I see all of our attendees are quiet, which is fine, but you guys are welcome to speak in the chat, and we can also open your mic to speak publicly if you'd like. Just put up your hand or speak in the chat. This one I've seen before. I'm not sure if it's a common thing, but they say that the gentleman's supposed to be on the roadside and the lady's supposed to be inside. Is that what's wrong?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly the assumption that is wrong with this picture. Yeah, men must protect women, shouldn't they, from incoming traffic, even when you're on the pavement. Perhaps it's assuming that women can't walk in a straight line. I'm not sure what it is, but it brings me on to the sort of academic point, which is chivalry, right? And the chivalry thesis that sort of links this into gender differences in crime. Now, chivalry generally, or contemporary understandings of chivalry, it's got archaic understandings, something to do with combat, but contemporary understandings of chivalry is basically treating others, but especially women, with courtesy, with sympathy, and with respect. So the chivalry thesis, to link this to criminal justice system, is the basic assumption that women are treated more leniently than men by the criminal justice system. And that's why we see those huge disparities that I alluded to with the statistics within the criminal justice system from a few slides ago. So police, as a result of this chivalrousness, if that's a word, really they're much less likely to charge women, and the courts tend to give them lighter sentences, even if they've committed the same offences as men. This is the assumption, yeah, because simply because they are women. And if we consider police as an institution, the courts as an institution, certainly the prison service as an institution, they are male-dominated. In large parts, they're male-dominated, and as a result, we'll see women with courtesy, with sympathy, and with respect, and therefore sort of turn a blind eye, or at least, at the very least, treat them much more leniently compared to men. Now, that's quite basic, and I want to counter that with another understanding of gender differences, which is double deviance. Now, this states that women are treated actually more harshly by the criminal justice system because they're doubly deviant. Not only have they deviated from social norms by breaking the law, but they've also deviated from the gender norms which state how women should behave. Society places these typical gender roles, these gender norms, gender laws, if you like, on how women should behave. And men and women have different gender norms, right? Men can be promiscuous, but women cannot. Men can go to the pub and drink 10 pints of lager, but women absolutely not. That's cannot be done. Yeah, this is how we're sort of brought up to believe. And as a result, then, many women feel that they've been treated much more harshly by the criminal justice system. They see it, as I've just mentioned previously, as a very male-dominated institution. I've just seen a question on the chat of what is the CJS. The CJS is the criminal justice system, right? So this is just a shorthand for the criminal justice system. Good question. Absolutely need to be clear on these acronyms, but what you will see the criminal justice system abbreviated to or initialized to is the criminal justice system, okay? So yeah, they feel like they've been even more harshly treated by the criminal justice system in comparison to men. And I want to sort of explain this using a case study, because we can perhaps, or at least I'm going to attempt to argue this in real time. Some of these people on screen might be familiar to you, perhaps not to others, and that's fine. So these two girls here in their Manchester United jerseys, these were kidnapped and murdered by Ian Huntley, who's pictured here. Now, the reason why this relates to double deviance is because Ian Huntley was the caretaker of Holly and Jessica, the victims of this heinous crime, at the school of Holly and Jessica. And when he came home from work, he said to Maxine Carr, who's pictured here, Ian Huntley's fiance at the time, look, there's loads of police at the school. I've no idea what's gone on, but if anybody comes knocking, I don't think they will, but if anybody comes knocking, can you say that I got home a little bit earlier than I actually did? Now, it's really impossible to say whether you would oblige to that request or not, but bear in mind this is a fiance, a loving fiance, who, and I actually defy anybody to at least sort of consider it, right? Well, Maxine Carr did consider it, and she went through with it. When the police came knocking, they said, no, Ian Huntley's got home at a particular time, when actually he didn't. When it later transpired that Ian Huntley did murder these two girls, he went away for a long, long time and currently resides in prison. Maxine Carr also got a sentence of a few years for perverting the course of justice. So that was her breaking the law. But because of the detail, because of the case, the facts of the case of this particular one involved children, where women are supposed to be nurturing, they're supposed to be caring, they're supposed to be mothers, right? Even that's a gender expectation. The way in which particularly the public reacted was almost as if she'd killed the two girls herself, which she didn't. She got death threats, there was huge moral public outrage. And this is because she broke both social norms, but also gender norms. So we can actually see double deviance in play. Nobody knows who Maxine Carr is anymore. Nobody knows where she is. She's got a completely new identity, completely new address. Nobody knows because the criminal justice system was very much in fear for her life. So nobody knows who or where she is. And perhaps we could put this down to double deviance. So now, in terms of weighing all of this up, I want you to think back to those statistics that I presented to you from earlier on, which outlined that after arrest, women are more likely than men to be cautioned rather than charged. They're less likely than men to be remanded in custody or committed for trial. So remember, remand is where they go straight into prison pending trial. They've not been found guilty yet. And when women are sent to prison, they receive shorter sentences than men, okay? So this appears to suggest that the chivalry thesis is correct, that women are treated more leniently than men. However, we need to make meaningful comparisons. When we're comparing like for like, we need to take into account the seriousness of the offences and the differences in offending history. What we need to weigh up are the aggravating and mitigating circumstances. The aggravating circumstances making prosecution and conviction more likely versus the mitigating circumstances, those factors that make prosecution and conviction less likely, okay? Now, quite simply put, the aggravating and mitigating circumstances between men and women. Women's offences, again, going back to that table that I showed you earlier on, women's offences tend to be less serious than men. And women are also less likely to have a criminal record. So if you don't have a criminal record, then you're likely to get a much lighter sentence if your case is proceeded with. So actually, what it suggests is that there isn't any sort of systematic bias for or against women. That actually the criminal justice system does a pretty good job of weighing up aggravating and mitigating circumstances and the facts of the case and coming to an outcome. So actually, despite the statistics suggesting the chivalry thesis is correct, that's not necessarily the case. Okay. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'm wrapping up. I know that people will be conscious of this as well. The sort of message that I wanted to get with this is not necessarily, you know, a lecture or a workshop or a session on gender and crime per se, but actually that in studying at DGHE, you are going to be coming across a number of theoretical perspectives. You're going to be coming across contrasting explanations, such as, you know, some of the ones that I've suggested to you today, on a whole range of phenomena. So what we must do is we must make meaningful comparisons to what we're studying. We need to challenge, we need to critique. Essentially what I'm saying to you is that we need to use our social scientific imagination. Now, public services sits within the School of Social Science and Health. So we do come across quite a lot of social science in this, and you can see C. Wright Mill's sociological imagination here. What this says is something that I alluded to beforehand. What we study is extremely complex. Not in that it's hard and that it's difficult, but it's complex, it's multifaceted, it's very nuanced. There are multiple explanations, multiple truths, in fact. So what we must do as students and academics is we must go way beyond those simplistic answers to what are extremely complex questions. And that is what is applying the social scientific imagination. It's breaking down, it's uncovering the different nuances, as I've just mentioned, that exist within the phenomena of which you're studying. And that's what we will be exploring throughout your course on public services and hopefully into level 6 top-up criminology.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Thank you.
Before we let you go, so we're going to have Maithili, our head of admissions, join us. There we go. I see Maithili is already here. Welcome, Maithili.
Hi, Anne.
Hi. So Jack, it was great to thank you so much for that initial lecture. Before we let Jack go, I'm not sure how many participants we have with us at this moment. I see them coming and going, but just wanted to remind you, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Also, we will make this video recording available for those who want to watch it afterwards. Jack, do you have any final words on, you know, why an HND in public services might be a good direction for some people who are here?
Yeah, I mean, the HND Public Services offers so many employability opportunities. It's not, although my session just there has been on the criminal justice system, it's not the only thing that you study at DGHE. It's much wider, it's much broader than that. There are so many employability opportunities. When we consider the third sector and voluntary sectors, for example, which are huge employers in the UK, looking at really interesting subjects, topics, social issues, we've just, you know, we're coming at the back end of a pandemic whereby we've seen more than ever the value of third sector supporting the public sector. So I would heartily recommend this qualification to anybody interested in society, in the social world, and exploring that and going and looking for that as a career.
Thank you so much, Jack. So if you want to get in touch with Jack, there's the contact on our website, and we can connect you with him. And now I'd like to pass it over to our head of admissions. Have a great day, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Melanie. See you soon.